There has been a lot of censorship in the gaming industry over the past few years, and a big portion of the games that have had elements censored are M-rated titles. I wanted to talk about games as a whole being toned down due to larger companies like Sony and Valve, but also how developers have changed their approach when they create games now due to how these companies have acted. So I understand that games need ratings due to laws, regulations, content policies, and different content receives different ratings, but I think just because a game receives a higher rating than maybe another does not mean that it is less valid, and that is something that in a sense has been pushed by larger companies. Let's look at Sony and Valve for a moment. They are the two largest culprits in this discussion. There are no known content guidelines when it comes to content that their employees follow. The employees have very few regulations when it comes to the banning or taking down of games, so we end up with employees who are hand-picking the content that ends up on a platform. And there have been spokespeople from both of these companies that have even admitted they have no censorship guidelines in place. There have been many examples recently where a game receives a ban, while another with nearly the same content is allowed to be sold on a platform and even ends up in people's recommended list because there were two different people accepting those titles. If you go to Steam, you can see things like dating simulators or visual novels on the platform, yet there are developers who have voiced how Steam denied their games that has very similar content. And if we look at an industry giant like Sony, they have pushed that narrative that family-friendly is the way to go, and adult-only games aren't valuable. They have stopped promoting adult content like visual novels, or even games that come out of regions like Japan, because social outrage is a powerful phenomena. Their standards are so different when it comes to the Western world of media that it may be so misunderstood or people may see things in such an offensive way, they decide just to not bring it to their systems at all, or they make their developers censor that content. Now, there will always be groups of people that dislike something, that will cause an uproar about it, and instead of putting themselves in the middle of the controversy, companies just ignore the content instead of accept the fact that it exists. Now, I understand that yes, a game that has a family-friendly and adult reach does have the potential to sell better, but what happens to the adults here? What happens to the people that want these games, that can obviously choose the content that they want? And looking at titles nowadays, characters, dialogue, and scenes are always being toned down due to how outraged people can become at simple situations. Female characters like Jill, Claire, and Tifa have had spats and black shirts added underneath their clothing so that they aren't showing any cleavage, and then they blame it on realism. Now, recently I discussed Jill in Resident Evil 3 and how they changed her skirt to a skirt after the art director openly admitted to toning down her sexual appeal. In Persona 5, they changed the dialogue due to people being outraged about it. Developers are changing how they design their characters and interactions with characters because they will be told by these large companies to change and censor their content, or it won't be sold on their storefront. And in some cases, developers have admitted to not wanting to face that backlash that comes with revealing character designs or even edgy dialogue options. And in all of the cases that I just listed, the games were rated M for mature, meaning developers should have been able to put that content on a platform comfortably and not worry about it. It's not even about what was censored in some cases. Adding shorts to a character or changing one word to another isn't the end of the world. Most people wouldn't boycott a game over simple changes like that, but it is still censorship, and in some cases, developers give very non-believable answers as to why the content was changed, instead of openly saying we had to change it due to Sony or Valve's content policies, because they can't admit that. So they have to lie to their customer base. But in some cases, we have developers being open and honest and saying we just don't want to even deal with the social outrage. And every time I bring up these topics of censorship, I get the counter argument that I am the outrage and why do I care? But I care about censorship and changes due to the real cancel culture. And if you don't voice your opinion, the next thing that we end up with are characters that are named Safe Space and Snowflake that aren't jokes, that are supposed to be taken seriously. If a developer wants to create a skimpily dressed character, there are no reasons why they should not be able to. If developers want to create a graphic scene, they should be able to because it has a rating for a reason. And developers should not have to feel like they need to change the art direction for their game, or else a platform may reject and ban their title from their storefront. That forces them into a corner. I think this trend of companies forcing censorship onto games is a step back for the industry. Instead of allowing developers the freedom to create what they want and support that, this pick and choose method is not working. If companies want to be more strict on the content that is released on their platforms, then they need to have clear and concise guidelines for creators to follow, and also for consumers to know. But that's all that I really had to discuss in today's video. If you find this topic important, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and give it a like, and of course if you did not, make sure to give it a dislike. I appreciate your support either way, and I will talk to you all again in the next video really soon.